And we're just soaking in all this, what we thought this truth and knowledge. People still go visit him and come out and think, he's a lot, I mean, I really like him. He's a lot like me.
Do you know whether he tried with any of his group members to get them to do things, sexual or otherwise, that would tend to bind them to him in a special way by virtue of participating in something that was so outlandish that it would serve as a bind?
Well, he used sex, but no, not in that way. What he did is he got women to give up their control and become one with him. And so he knew how to do that. So that was almost like a drug, the sex part.
Now, you mentioned already some of the ways in which Manson was able to indoctrinate a certain group of vulnerable people, his charisma, the sex, and so on. There was also a way in which he would have people imitate his movements or gestures. Was that another?
It wasn't imitating. It was becoming one with him, being him. He was saying there's only one man. We wanted to be that one, and we wanted to, we weren't imitating him, we were trying to be that one. We were trying to be Charlie.
Manson used the mind-altering drugs and sex to make his followers more receptive to his control. He methodically broke down their sense of self. More and more, Manson targeted vulnerable white middle-class kids. Susan Atkins, 19. Patricia Krenwinkel, 20. Leslie Van Houten, 18.
They were younger. It was easier for Charlie just to wipe out the thoughts that they had. They were more pliable. He'd say, thinking is stinking. Don't think anymore. Be like a little child. Be like me. If you even wanted to question or talk about anything, you couldn't do it because you weren't supposed to think.
As his cult expanded, Manson tightened his grip.
When you isolate someone or a group of people, and there's no newspapers, there's no television, there's no parents, there's no family, he becomes, the newscaster, the prophet, the, father, mother, everything.
Did he think of himself as godlike in some way, or a special being?
He never had to say so. He was real good at letting you come to that conclusion. Mm-hmm. I just thought that he had a clear line to God, and God spoke through him. That's what I thought.
Manson instilled in his followers a fear of society and a fanatical desire for the coming of Helter Skelter, a global race war. He manipulated them so he could take his revenge on the world. He was ready to put his disciples' devotion to deadly use. But could he convince them that something was right, even when they knew it to be wrong? Scientific research reveals that this is not as difficult as it may seem. For more than 5 decades, researchers have been investigating group conformity and how leaders like Manson manipulate their followers. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch was among the first to examine the power of conformity.
Asch decided he wanted to see whether there was something weird or special about people who followed crazy leaders, or whether you and I, or the average person, under the right circumstances, could be made to conform.
Asch's conformity experiment is legendary among social psychologists like Dr. Benjamin Zablocki.
Afternoon.
It requires no expensive technology. A test subject is placed in a room with a group of actors pretending to be subjects.
Here's Exhibit 1.
They're all shown a pair of cards. The first has a line drawn on it. The second has several lines of different lengths. The test subject is asked to pick the line that matches the one on the first card.
Everyone else, all of the actors who are pretending to be experimental subjects, give the wrong answer.
B.
After all of these actors have given the wrong answer,
B.
The turn comes to
B.
the real experimental subject.
The experiment tests whether the subject will go against the group and answer correctly, or conform and give what he knows is the wrong answer.
It's A.
Initially, many test subjects give the correct answer, but they don't do it easily.
Most people hesitate. They exhibit externally the conflict that's going on inside them between the desire to be a part of the group and the desire to follow the evidence of their own eyes.
But as the experiment proceeds, most subjects begin to go along with the group and give the wrong answer.
A.
The desire to be accepted overcomes the desire to be right.
It's A.
What's found is that 75% of the experimental subjects deny the evidence of their own eyesight and conform or go along with what other people have said. It was not because they had legitimate reason to be unsure, but because they were swept away by this power of conformity to the unanimous group opinion.
Scientists attribute this behavior to a phenomenon known as groupthink.
A.
Cult leaders are able to manipulate their followers by exploiting this basic need and desire to be part of the group. Charles Manson was a master at manipulating his family of followers. And on August the 8th, 1969, he put their devotion to a grisly use. By the summer of 1969, Charles Manson had assembled a group of followers on an isolated ranch in the California desert. The cult included about 24 middle-class kids. Manson was able to manipulate what social psychologists call groupthink to turn these average kids into devoted cult members. Charlie began to preach what he called Helter Skelter. It was to be the beginning of an apocalyptic global race war that would bring about the end of the world, with he and his followers emerging as leaders of the survivors.
He'd talk about what's going to happen in the future and things that are going to happen and prophetic things. People killing each other, riots, blacks against whites. It was the mother of all wars that he was talking about, where everyone would just start killing everybody else. I had to believe in him. I had to, because I didn't want to be left behind to die with the rest of the burning cities. I wanted to be one of them that survived. And so everyone there was just wanting to be part of this great thing that was happening. It's a blueprint for every cult that's ever been. Your leader is the only one that has the in with God and knows what's going to go on, and if you don't follow, then you're not going to survive it.
But as the summer of '69 went on, Helter Skelter didn't happen. Catherine Scher believes Manson was afraid he would soon lose control of the family.
And why was he going to lose control?
Because if you tell people for 3 straight years that everyone's going to go crazy, and they go to town and people are, you know, going to the movies and going to the beach and having fun, and it's still not happening, if you're wrong about that, maybe you're wrong about everything else.
Right.
And maybe somewhere in his very sick mind, he thought maybe he could start something.
In an effort to spark his predicted race war, Manson targeted affluent white victims. He expected that authorities would blame the murders on African Americans. But Charlie didn't intend to kill the victims himself. On the night of August the 8th, 1969, he dispatched some of his most devoted followers: Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Tex Watson. Manson gave Tex a gun and told him to leave something witchy. Later that weekend, police discovered 7 bodies. When the killers were finally identified months later, America was shocked to learn that they were middle-class hippies.
This was the ultimate goal of all Manson's manipulation and coercion: to shed blood without having to get any of it on his own hands. And he got exactly what he wanted out of his brainwashed followers: more victims to take the fall for his hatred. Manson created a sense that even children who had been raised with traditional values were not safe. And it is this ability to instill such a fear in their families that builds the foundation of his evil.
For Dr. Stone, Manson poses difficult issues.
The Manson case raises the question, to what extent are brainwashed cult followers responsible for their actions? Can people be tricked or manipulated into committing evil acts against their will? Or does evil lie dormant in all of us in varying degrees, until someone like a Charles Manson draws it out?
The summer after the murders, LA County Deputy District Attorney Vincent Bugliosi was preparing to bring Charles Manson to trial. Despite the confession of Susan Atkins and the evidence police had gathered, the case against Manson was problematic.
The problem that I had is that Manson did not physically participate in these murders. He was not present at the time of the murders, so I had to bring him in by way of circumstantial evidence. I looked at this little guy, certainly not an imposing figure, but I immediately knew that it would be a very big mistake on my part if I underestimated him, because he apparently had this unbelievable control over these people to get them to do anything he wanted, including murdering fellow human beings. I needed example after example to show that he completely dominated these people. And at the trial, it became very obvious that Charles Manson, he was the king, the dictatorial ruler of that family.
Even from a closely guarded prison cell, Manson was able to manipulate and dominate his disciples. The groupthink among his loyal followers was as strong as ever. They insisted that Manson was innocent. Susan Atkins refused to testify against him at trial. Of all the young women who fell in with Charles Manson, Barbara Hoyt was one of the few who had been able to break free. Bugliosi realized that Hoyt might be the key to convicting Manson. Hoyt was just 17 years old when she met the cult leader.
I thought he was like magic. I thought he was just an angel. Somebody who could read minds and somebody who understood everything. Because he was so charismatic. He was kind of a pure soul. And he was fun. He was a lot of fun.
Following the Tate and LaBianca murders, Manson retreated to a desert hideout called Barker Ranch. There, Hoyt saw a different side to the cult.
Charlie gathered us up and took us immediately to Barker Ranch, which is a very isolated place in the desert. The family wasn't fun anymore. It became a very fearful place. I didn't know yet about the Tate LaBianca murders.
That was something you became, if not convinced about, at least aware of a little later.
They came in the trailer and told me to turn on the news. And of course, the first story was about the Tate murders. And they laughed. And I thought there was something wrong with me, that I had not X'd myself out of the society very well, because it affected me. It really scared me. That's when I heard that these murders had occurred. I did not know that I was sitting amongst the murderers. I had no idea about that until later.
A lot later?
When we were in the desert, at the very end of August, I overheard Sadie telling Ush about the murders and describing the death of Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, and the LaBianca residents.